Captain Maya, Chun watched the satellite feed flicker across the screen in the operations center, her finger tracing the enemy movement patterns that had consumed her attention for the past 72 hours. The thermal signatures showed 3 columns advancing toward Marine positions with the kind of confidence that made experienced commanders nervous. Colonel Briggs stood behind her with his arms crossed, the leather of his jacket creaking as he shifted his weight. Your plan has us sitting still while 800 hostiles walk right up to our front door, Chun. Briggs's voice carried the edge of a man who had watched too many operations go sideways. Explain to me why we're not establishing a defensive perimeter at 500 meters like doctrine requires. Chun pulled up the tactical overlay, the blue icons representing Marine positions appearing deliberately sparse across the digital map. The enemy has pursued every weak position they've encountered over the past 6 weeks, sir. Their commander commits overwhelming force the moment he identifies invulnerability. She zoomed in on the approach vectors, 3 arrows converging on the forward Marine position. We give him what he expects to see, and he'll commit everything he has. Major Patterson stepped closer to the display, his jaw tight as he studied the kill boxes Chun had designated around the Marine positions. You're talking about letting them get within 200 meters. That's suicide if your timing is off by 30 seconds. The calculations account for enemy advance rate, artillery response time, and sniper team coordination down to 5-second intervals. Chun brought up the firing sequences, color-coded zones spreading across the terrain in concentric rings. They enter the outer kill box at 300 meters, the middle zone at 200, and the primary concentration point at 150. We hit all 3 simultaneously. Briggs moved to the map table where physical terrain models showed the actual ground topology. The other officers in the operations center had stopped their conversations, attention fixed on the exchange unfolding between Chun and the colonel. And if they don't bunch up the way you predict, if they spread out or advance in waves instead of columns, then we adapt the firing pattern to match their formation, but every simulation shows they won't. Chin pulled up reconnaissance footage from previous engagements, enemy formations clearly visible in the grainy video. Major Qasim has used the same tactical approach in 14 separate operations. He identifies what he perceives as a weak point, concentrates his forces for a decisive strike, and overwhelms the position before reinforcements arrive. His success rate makes him predictable. Patterson shook his head, his skepticism evident in the way he tapped the table surface. You're betting Marine lives on predictability. What happens when he changes his pattern for operation number 15? We have fallback positions at every stage, layered defenses that activate regardless of his approach vector. Chun highlighted the backup zones, showing how each layer provided overlapping fields of fire. But he won't change, sir. Commanders who win repeatedly don't alter successful strategies until those strategies fail. General Morrow entered the operations center, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic as junior officers straightened and stepped back from the table. He studied the display for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his assessment. Captain Chun, I've read your tactical brief 3 times. Walk me through why this works better than conventional forward defense. Chun reset the display to show the full operational area. Conventional defense puts our Marines in direct engagement at maximum range, which gives Qasim time to adjust his approach based on our strength and positioning. My plan lets him see exactly what he wants to see, a forward position that appears undermanned and vulnerable. He commits his full force to exploit that weakness, and by the time he recognizes the trap, his troops are concentrated in predetermined kill zones with no effective retreat options. Morrow nodded slowly, his eyes tracking across the terrain features that Chun had incorporated into the ambush design. Your artillery timing assumes perfect coordination across 3 fire bases. Any delay collapses your primary kill zone effectiveness. Artillery teams have run the sequence 40 times in the past week, sir. Response time averages 4.0 seconds from execute order to first round impact. Chun pulled up the firing data, timestamps showing the practice runs. We've built in a 7-second window to account for variation, but they've never needed more than 6. The general turned to Briggs, the silent question obvious in his expression. The colonel straightened, his resistance clear, but his professionalism overriding personal doubt. The plan is sound on paper, sir. My concern is the human element. Asking Marines to hold position while 800 hostiles approach within small arms range tests discipline beyond normal parameters. Sergeant Davis and his team have those positions, sir. Chin interjected, her confidence in the ground forces evident. They understand the tactical necessity, and they've trained for this exact scenario. They won't break. Morrow studied the display for another 30 seconds before speaking. You have authorization to proceed, Captain, but I'm assigning Major Patterson as tactical oversight. He has authority to modify or abort the operation if conditions deviate from your projections. He turned to Patterson directly. You stay in this operations center with Captain Chin. If you see something she's missing, you speak up immediately. Patterson acknowledged the order with a crisp nod, though his expression showed he expected to use that authority before the operation concluded. Chun felt the weight of conditional approval, the unspoken message clear that her career hinged on the next 8 hours proving her analysis correct. The operations center settled into focused preparation, officers moving to their stations as the countdown to enemy contact began. Chun pulled up the live drone feed, watching Qasim's forces advance with the kind of mechanical precision that validated every prediction she had made. They were coming, exactly as she had calculated, and in 6 hours they would learn that apparent weakness masked the deadliest trap any of them would encounter. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your state or country in the comments. Briggs moved beside her, his voice lower now that the general had left. You better be right about this, Chun, because if you're wrong, those Marines in the forward position pay the price for your tactical theory. Chun met his gaze without flinching. I'm right, sir. And by dawn, Major Qasim will understand that Marines don't retreat because we're weak. We hold position because we've already won. Chun isolated the surveillance footage from the past 18 days, her eyes tracking movement patterns that most analysts would dismiss as tactical variations. The intelligence center hummed with the sound of servers processing real-time data feeds from 6 different drone platforms. But her focus remained locked on the behavioral signatures that revealed more than any intercepted communication could provide. Lieutenant Rodriguez entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside Chen's keyboard before studying the screen over her shoulder. You've been staring at the same footage since 0400. What am I missing? Watch how Qasim's formations respond to indirect fire. Chen replayed a sequence from 11 days prior. Enemy columns advancing across open terrain until mortar rounds impacted 200 meters ahead of their lead elements. See that? They don't disperse or seek cover. They accelerate toward the source of fire. Rodriguez leaned closer, his interest sharpening as the pattern became obvious. That's tactically insane. Any competent commander pulls back and flanks the position. Chun cycled through 4 more engagements, each showing the same aggressive response to defensive fire. Qasim interprets defensive action as weakness. He's built his entire tactical philosophy around overwhelming positions before they can consolidate. She pulled up a tactical analysis report, highlighting success rates that explain the psychology. 14 victories in 16 engagements over the past 4 months. He's not insane, he's operationally validated. The drone feed updated, showing current enemy positions 30 kilometers from the Marine forward base. Rodriguez studied the formation composition, noting the concentration of experienced units in the lead elements. He's bringing his best troops for this one. That's 3 veteran battalions plus mechanized support. Chun zoomed in on the command vehicles, recognizing the distinctive antenna configuration that marked Qasim's mobile headquarters. He's personally leading the assault. That tells us everything we need to know about how he values this target. She switched to the intelligence summary that had landed on her desk 6 hours earlier. Intercepted communications show he's promised his commanders a decisive victory that will break Marine presence in the entire region. Rodriguez straightened, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. You're planning to let him commit every available asset to a position he thinks he can overrun. What happens if he succeeds? He won't succeed because the position he sees isn't the position he'll encounter. Chun brought up the layered defense plan, showing how the apparent vulnerability masked a sophisticated ambush architecture. Every psychological indicator says he'll concentrate his forces for a single overwhelming strike. The moment he commits to that approach, he's fighting on our terms in terrain we've prepared for this exact scenario. The lieutenant studied the kill zones, his tactical training identifying the overlapping fields of fire that would trap any force concentrated in the approach corridors. You're counting on him being overconfident. That's a lot of weight to put on psychological assessment. Chun pulled up the enemy commander's service record, highlighting engagements that showed consistent patterns across multiple theaters of operation. Qasim has never faced a prepared defensive ambush because he's never encountered a commander willing to accept the risk of letting him close to effective range. His victories have reinforced a belief system that aggressive assault overwhelms defensive positions. We're not betting on overconfidence. We're exploiting operational conditioning. Rodriguez moved to the terrain display, measuring distances between the forward Marine position and the concealed support elements. Your plan puts Sergeant Davis and his team within 200 meters of 800 hostiles. That's close enough to see individual faces, which is exactly why it works. Chun highlighted the psychological component of the tactical plan. Qasim needs to believe he's facing a standard defensive position that underestimated his capability. If Davis pulls back or shows the kind of strength that would deter assault, the entire trap fails. The forward team has to appear vulnerable while actually functioning as bait in a sophisticated ambush system. The intelligence officer who had been monitoring communications at the adjacent workstation turned toward them, pulling off his headset. "Captain, we're picking up increased radio traffic from enemy forward scouts. They've identified our position, and they're reporting troop concentrations that match your projections." Chun felt the tactical puzzle pieces clicking into place exactly as she had calculated. "What's the tone of those communications?" "Confident, Mom. Almost excited. They think they found a gap in our defensive coverage." The officer played back the translated intercept, enemy voices clearly indicating they believed they had discovered a tactical weakness ready for exploitation. Rodriguez shook his head, a grim smile forming as he recognized what Chun had engineered. "You didn't just set a trap, you advertised it in a way that makes them think they found it themselves." Human psychology hasn't changed in 3,000 years of warfare. Chun brought up historical tactical analyses showing similar psychological exploitation across multiple centuries of conflict. Commanders who achieve success through aggression develop pattern-dependent thinking. They see what they expect to see, and they respond the way they've been conditioned to respond. Qasim is brilliant at executing his tactical philosophy, which makes him predictable when someone understands that philosophy. The drone feed updated again, showing enemy formations beginning their advance toward the Marine position. Rodriguez calculated the timeline, estimating 6 hours until they reached weapons range. Colonel Briggs is going to be watching every meter of their approach. The moment they get inside 500 meters, he's going to want to engage. That's why General Morrow assigned Patterson as oversight. Chun pulled up the communications protocol that would govern the operation. "I have tactical authority unless Patterson determines conditions have deviated from projections. As long as Qasim does exactly what I predicted, I control the engagement timeline. And if he doesn't?" Rodriguez asked the question that every officer in the operations center would be asking in the hours ahead. Chun met his eyes with the calm certainty of someone who had run every simulation and analyzed every variable. "Then I've misread the most important tactical assessment of my career, and Marines die because I was wrong." She turned back to the display where enemy forces continued their methodical advance. "But I'm not wrong, Lieutenant. Qasim is going to commit everything he has to destroying that forward position. And when he does, we're going to eliminate his entire force in less than 8 minutes." Rodriguez studied her expression, seeing the absolute confidence that came from exhaustive analysis and pattern recognition. I hope you're right, ma'am, because in 6 hours, we're all going to find out if tactical psychology beats conventional doctrine. Chun pulled up the final preparation checklist, systems indicators showing green across every element of the ambush architecture. We already know it does, Lieutenant. Qasim just hasn't learned that lesson yet. By dawn, he'll understand that Marines don't defend positions by sitting at maximum range. We defend them by controlling when and where the enemy dies. Sergeant Davis crouched behind the concrete barrier that formed the forward position's primary defensive structure, his eyes scanning the terrain that stretched 400 meters to the ridgeline, where his sniper teams had positioned themselves 6 hours earlier. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound, creating the illusion of activity where only 12 Marines maintained what appeared to be a skeleton defensive force. The position looks thin, Sarge. Corporal Martinez kept her voice low, though the nearest enemy scouts remained kilometers away according to the latest intelligence update. Anyone studying this place would think we're undermanned. That's the entire point. Davis adjusted his rifle, the weapon positioned to provide covering fire for the apparent gaps in their defensive coverage. Captain Chun needs the enemy to believe they can overrun this position with a standard assault. We're the bait that makes them commit everything they have. Martinez studied the kill zones that Chun had designated across the approach terrain. The coordinates burned into her memory through repeated briefing sessions. Those hidden positions at 400 meters, they're going to stay quiet while 800 hostiles walk right past them. Davis nodded toward the ridgeline, where the elevation provided perfect fields of fire for the concealed sniper teams. Staff Sergeant Williams has 16 shooters up there with enough ammunition to engage continuous targets for 20 minutes. They don't fire until Chun gives the execute order, which means they watch the enemy advance without taking a single shot. The corporal's expression showed the kind of discipline required to maintain that level of tactical patience. I've never heard of letting enemy forces get that close intentionally. Doctrine says engage at maximum effective range and maintain fire superiority. Doctrine assumes you're trying to stop an assault. Davis checked his communications equipment, confirming the encrypted link to the operations center remained active. We're not stopping anything. We're channeling 800 enemy troops into predetermined kill zones where we can eliminate them simultaneously. Captain Chun designed this ambush to destroy their entire force, not just repel an attack. The radio crackled with Chen's voice, transmitting the latest intelligence update. All positions, enemy scouts have visual on your location. Maintain current activity levels. You are green-lit to appear undermanned and vulnerable. Davis acknowledged the transmission, then signaled his team to adjust their visible presence. 2 Marines moved to positions near the compound's perimeter where enemy observation would clearly count their numbers, while others remained concealed to create the impression of inadequate defensive strength. Martinez positioned herself at the eastern barrier, her movements deliberately casual to reinforce the perception of a relaxed defensive posture. How long until they reach weapons range? Chen's timeline puts them at 500 meters in approximately 4 hours. Davis studied the approach corridors, recognizing how the terrain naturally funneled advancing forces into the 3 designated kill boxes. They'll maintain formation discipline until they think they've identified all our defensive capabilities. Then Qasim will order the final assault. The sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance, the distinctive rhythm indicating the Marine support aircraft that formed another layer of the ambush architecture. Martinez tracked the flight path, watching the helicopters maintain positions that kept them outside immediate enemy visual range, while remaining close enough for rapid response. Those birds stay back until the trap springs, Davis explained, anticipating her question. Once artillery opens up and the snipers engage, the helicopters come in to cut off retreat routes and eliminate any forces that break through the primary kill zones. A second transmission from Chun provided updated enemy positions with precision that demonstrated the comprehensive surveillance coverage. Enemy main force 22 kilometers out, advancing in 3 columns. Formation matches projections. All elements maintain discipline and hold fire until execute order. Davis felt the weight of tactical patience, understanding that the success of Chen's plan required every Marine involved to suppress their training and instinct to engage threats at maximum range. The enemy needed to believe they faced a standard defensive position until the moment the ambush triggered, which meant allowing hostile forces to approach within distances that violated every conventional doctrine. Martinez checked her ammunition supplies, though she knew the actual engagement would rely more on the concealed support elements than the forward position's visible strength. What happens if they split their forces? If Qasim sends one column to pin us down while the others flank our position? Then we adapt, but Chen's analysis says he won't. Davis pulled up the tactical display on his ruggedized tablet, showing the enemy commander's historical pattern of concentrated assault. Every engagement in his record shows the same approach. Identify the weakness, commit overwhelming force, achieve decisive victory before enemy reinforcements arrive. His success rate has conditioned him to trust that strategy. The corporal studied the terrain features that would channel enemy movement regardless of their tactical choices. Even if he wanted to flank, the terrain doesn't give him good options. Those ridgelines force him into the valleys, and the valleys lead straight into our kill boxes. Davis nodded, recognizing how Chen had selected terrain that limited enemy options while appearing to provide multiple approach vectors. The captain didn't just design an ambush, she chose ground that makes her plan the logical enemy choice. Qasim thinks he's exploiting our weakness, but he's actually following a script she wrote 18 days ago. The forward position settled into the waiting that would define the next 4 hours, Marines maintaining the appearance of inadequate defensive preparation while sophisticated ambush architecture surrounded them in layers the enemy couldn't detect. Davis knew the psychological pressure would intensify as hostile forces closed the distance, but the success of the entire operation depended on every Marine holding discipline until Chen's precisely calculated moment. Martinez moved to her assigned position, her voice steady despite the unconventional nature of the tactical situation. I joined the Marines, expecting to fight from positions of strength. Never thought I'd be bait in the deadliest trap I've ever heard of. Davis checked his weapon one final time, his confidence in Chen's tactical analysis absolute despite the risk inherent in allowing enemy forces to approach within 200 meters. You're not bait, Corporal. You're the trigger mechanism in a weapon system that's about to eliminate an entire enemy battalion. By the time the sun sets, Major Qasim is going to understand that Marines don't retreat because we're weak. We hold position because we control when the killing starts. The Operations Center transmitted final preparation confirmations, artillery teams reporting ready status, while sniper positions confirmed optimal firing solutions across all designated kill zones. The ambush was set. The enemy was advancing exactly as predicted, and in 4 hours the Marine Corps would demonstrate that tactical innovation could achieve what conventional doctrine never attempted. Martinez settled into her position, watching the distant horizon where enemy forces advanced with the confidence of commanders who had never encountered a prepared ambush designed by someone who understood their psychology better than they understood themselves. I hope Captain Chen is right about this, Sarge, because if she's not, we're about to have a very bad day. Davis smiled grimly, his faith in the tactical plan unshaken by the unconventional nature of the operation. She's right, Corporal, and in a few hours, 800 enemy troops are going to learn that lesson the hard way. Colonel Briggs stood at the Operations Center display, his jaw tight, as the real-time feed showed enemy forces reaching the 12-kilometer mark. The digital overlay tracked 3 distinct columns converging on the forward position with mechanical precision, each formation maintaining the kind of disciplined advance that indicated experienced leadership and confident troops. Captain Chen, those forces are moving faster than your initial projections. Briggs tapped the screen where the lead elements had accelerated their pace. They'll reach 500 meters in 90 minutes, not the 4 hours you calculated. Chen studied the updated movement data, her expression showing concentration rather than concern. They're eager, sir. Qasim sees what he interprets as a vulnerable position, and he's accelerating the timeline to prevent us from reinforcing. She adjusted the tactical countdown, recalculating artillery timing and sniper coordination windows. This actually improves our position. The faster they advance, the less time they have to conduct detailed reconnaissance. Major Patterson moved closer to the display, his role as tactical oversight making him scrutinize every deviation from Chen's original plan. Faster advance means less time for our teams to prepare. Your artillery crews were expecting 4 hours to finalize firing solutions. The solutions are already finalized, sir. Chun brought up the fire control data, showing pre-calculated coordinates for every designated kill zone. Artillery teams confirmed green status 2 hours ago. They're waiting for the execute order, not preparing to fire. Briggs zoomed in on the forward position where Davis and his 12 Marines maintained their deliberately vulnerable appearance. You're asking those Marines to hold discipline while 800 hostiles close to engagement range in half your projected timeline. That changes the psychological pressure significantly. Sergeant Davis and his team understand the tactical necessity. Chun pulled up the communications log showing regular check-ins from the forward position. They're holding discipline and maintaining the appearance we need. The faster enemy advance actually reduces their exposure time. Patterson shook his head, his skepticism growing as the tactical situation compressed. I'm recommending we authorize Davis to fall back to secondary positions. We can still execute the ambush from 400 meters instead of 200. Chen turned to face him directly, her voice firm but respectful of his authority. Sir, the trap requires the enemy to commit their full force to overrunning what they perceive as an isolated, undermanned position. If we pull back now, Qasim will interpret that as standard defensive doctrine and adjust his approach accordingly. He'll disperse his formations, establish fire bases, and conduct a methodical assault instead of the concentrated push we need. The Major studied the display for a long moment, clearly weighing the risk against the tactical advantage. Your entire plan depends on psychological manipulation of the enemy commander. What happens when human behavior doesn't follow your predictions? Then I've failed, and we execute contingency protocols. Chun brought up the fallback positions that provided conventional defensive options if the ambush failed. But Qasim has followed his pattern in every engagement for 4 months. His acceleration proves he's reacting exactly as I predicted. He thinks speed will prevent us from consolidating our defense. General Morrow entered the operations center, his presence immediately shifting the tension as officers straightened and adjusted their focus. Status report, Captain. Enemy forces at 12 kilometers and accelerating, sir. They'll reach weapons range in approximately 90 minutes instead of 4 hours. Chen highlighted the updated timeline on the main display. All ambush elements remain green and ready for execution. The faster advance actually validates our psychological assessment of the enemy commander. Morrow studied the formation movements, his experienced eye recognizing the aggressive confidence that characterized Qasim's tactical approach. He's coming hard and fast because he thinks he's found a weak point. You're confident your teams can maintain discipline with that kind of pressure? Yes, sir. Every Marine involved understands that premature engagement collapses the entire ambush. They'll hold until the execute order. The general turned to Patterson, the silent question obvious in his expression. The Major hesitated, clearly torn between his concern and the evidence that Chen's predictions continued to prove accurate. Captain Chen's assessment has been validated at every stage, sir. My concern is the compressed timeline increases risk, but I acknowledge the tactical logic remains sound. Briggs spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. General, I'm requesting authorization to reposition Davis and his team to secondary defensive positions. We can still execute the ambush from increased standoff distance. Negative, Colonel. Morrow's decision was immediate and final. Captain Chen's plan requires the enemy to commit everything to a concentrated assault. Any visible withdrawal signals defensive weakness and changes enemy tactical calculus. He turned to Chen directly. You have my authorization to proceed as planned. Major Patterson maintains oversight authority, but tactical decisions remain yours unless he identifies conditions that fundamentally invalidate your projections. Chun felt the burden of absolute authority settle across her shoulders, understanding that 12 Marines in the forward position trusted her analysis with their lives. Acknowledged, sir. All elements will hold current positions and maintain discipline until enemy forces reach optimal kill zone concentration. The operations center settled into focused intensity as the countdown to engagement compressed, every officer aware that the next 90 minutes would validate or destroy Chen's reputation as a tactical innovator. Patterson positioned himself directly beside her workstation, his presence a constant reminder that one wrong assessment could trigger an override that would collapse the entire ambush. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your state or country in the comments. Chen pulled up the live drone feed, watching enemy scouts advance ahead of the main columns. The scouts moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the terrain for hidden threats while reporting back to Qasim's command element. She knew those reports would confirm what the enemy commander expected to see, an undermanned Marine position that had failed to establish adequate defensive depth. Artillery teams report continuous green status. Captain. The fire control officer transmitted the update with professional calm that masked the tension everyone felt. All firing solutions locked and verified. They're ready to execute on your command. Sniper positions confirm optimal sight lines across all kill zones. The second update came from Williams, his voice steady despite the pressure of holding fire while enemy forces advanced into range. We count 580 hostiles in visual range, with more approaching. Holding fire per your orders. Chun acknowledged both transmissions, her attention fixed on the tactical display where 3 enemy columns converged with lethal precision toward the trap she had designed. Briggs stood 3 feet away, his body language radiating disapproval even as he maintained professional discipline. Patterson's hand rested near the communications panel, ready to override her authority the moment conditions deviated from projections. The enemy was coming exactly as she had predicted, moving faster than initial calculations, but following the psychological script she had written. In 90 minutes, Major Qasim would commit his entire force to destroying a position that appeared vulnerable, but actually functioned as the trigger mechanism in the most sophisticated ambush the Marine Corps had executed in the current theater. Chun pulled up the final engagement checklist, verifying every element one last time before the point of no return. All systems green. All teams ready. The only variable remaining was whether her understanding of enemy psychology would prove accurate when 800 hostile troops closed to distances where mistakes became fatal. Patterson's voice cut through her concentration. Captain, you have 87 minutes until enemy forces reach your designated engagement range. I want confirmation every 15 minutes that conditions remain consistent with your projections. Understood, sir. Chen met his eyes with absolute confidence. They'll reach 200 meters in 87 minutes. They'll be concentrated in the primary kill zone, and when I give the execute order, we'll eliminate them before they understand what happened. Briggs turned away from the display, his final comment carrying both warning and reluctant acknowledgement. You better be right, Chun, because there's no second chances once this starts. Sergeant Davis watched through his scope as enemy scouts crested the ridgeline 800 meters distant, their silhouettes briefly visible against the morning sky before they dropped into cover positions. The forward position had fallen into disciplined silence, 12 Marines maintaining their posts while hostile forces closed the distance with methodical precision. Contact, 500 meters. Corporal Martinez transmitted the update using encrypted burst communication that minimized enemy intercept risk. 3 scouts advancing along the eastern approach vector. They're studying our positions. Davis tracked the scouts through his optics, watching them use terrain features for concealment while conducting detailed observation of the Marine defensive layout. Let them look. They need to see exactly what Captain Shun wants them to see. The scouts moved with professional competence, their movements indicating experienced soldiers rather than conscripts. Martinez counted their observation time, noting how thoroughly they documented the forward position's apparent weaknesses. They're spending a lot of time on our gaps. They've identified the eastern barrier as undermanned. Perfect. Davis kept his voice calm despite the psychological pressure of being studied by enemy forces preparing to attack his position. That eastern barrier is supposed to look vulnerable. It channels their assault directly into Kill Box 2. The radio crackled with Chen's voice from the operations center, her tone carrying the kind of focused intensity that came from watching tactical predictions materialize in real time. All positions, enemy main force now at 400 meters. Scouts are reporting back to their command element. Maintain current defensive posture. Davis acknowledged the transmission, then signaled his team to adjust their visible presence in ways that reinforce the perception of inadequate strength. Two Marines repositioned to create obvious gaps in coverage, while others remained concealed to preserve the illusion of an undermanned position desperately trying to cover too much ground. The enemy scouts withdrew, their mission apparently complete. Martinez tracked their movement until they disappeared beyond the ridgeline. They got a good look at us, Sarge. Whatever they're reporting is going to determine how Qasim approaches this assault. Chen's analysis says he'll interpret what he sees as confirmation of his intelligence reports. Davis studied the approach corridors, visualizing how 800 enemy troops would funnel through terrain that appeared to offer multiple options, but actually channel them into predetermined zones. He thinks he's identified a weak point. He's going to commit everything he has to exploiting it before we can reinforce. The sound of vehicles became audible in the distance, the distinctive rumble of mechanized forces moving across broken terrain. Martinez adjusted her position, listening to the approaching sounds with the kind of focused attention that came from understanding those vehicles carried troops preparing to attack her position. That's armor support. Qasim is bringing heavy weapons. Chun had predicted mechanized elements. Davis reminded himself, trusting the intelligence analysis that had proven accurate at every stage. The armor makes them confident, which makes them predictable. They think the heavy weapons will suppress our defensive fire, while infantry closes for the assault. A new transmission from Williams at the sniper positions provided updated enemy disposition. Sniper 1 to forward, I count 200-plus hostiles staging at 350 meters. They're organizing into assault formations. Multiple vehicle-mounted weapons visible. Davis felt his heart rate increase despite his training. The reality of enemy forces massing within weapons range, triggering instinctive responses that discipline had to override. Hold fire. All positions maintain discipline. They need to commit fully before we engage. Martinez watched the staging area through her scope, counting troops and identifying equipment types that indicated serious assault capability. Sarge, they're bringing up RPGs and heavy machine guns. That's enough firepower to flatten this position if we let them get organized, which is why we're not going to let them get organized. Davis checked his communications link to the operations center, confirming Chun maintained tactical control. The moment they commit to the assault, artillery will hit them before they can employ those heavy weapons. We just need to make them believe they have time to prepare. The enemy forces continued their methodical staging, commanders positioning units with a kind of careful planning that demonstrated professional military training. Davis recognized the tactical efficiency, understanding that Qasim had earned his reputation through this kind of competent execution. The enemy commander wasn't making mistakes. He was following doctrine that had achieved 14 victories in 16 engagements. Chen's voice cut through the tactical frequency with updated intelligence. Enemy command element has moved to forward observation position. Qasim is personally directing this assault. All indicators confirm he's committing his entire force to a concentrated attack on your position. Davis transmitted acknowledgement, then turned to his team with final instructions. When they come, they're going to come hard and fast. Remember your training and trust the plan. We hold this position until Captain Chun gives the execute order, no matter how close they get. The Marines settled into firing positions, their discipline evident in movements that remained controlled despite the approaching threat. Martinez checked her ammunition one final time, her voice steady though her hands betrayed slight tension. "How close are we talking, Sarge?" Chen's briefing mentioned 200 meters. "Closer." Davis had studied the tactical plan in detail, understanding the psychological requirements that drove every distance calculation. 150 meters for optimal kill zone concentration. They need to be close enough that they can't disperse when the trap springs. Martinez absorbed that information with visible effort, her training warring with instinct that screamed to engage targets at maximum range. That's grenade throwing distance. We'll be able to see their faces, which is exactly why this works. Davis watched enemy forces continue their preparation, recognizing how Chun had engineered a situation where apparent weakness masked overwhelming strength. Conventional tactics put us at 500 meters trading fire until one side breaks. Captain Chen's plan eliminates their entire force in the first 8 minutes because they'll never have a chance to react. The staging area showed increased activity as enemy commanders finalized their assault preparations. Williams transmitted another update from the sniper positions. Forward, they're moving into assault positions. Estimate 60 seconds until they begin their advance. Chen's voice carried absolute certainty through the communications channel. All elements stand by. Enemy is about to commit. Hold discipline and trust your training. Artillery teams report ready status. Davis felt time compress as tactical theory transformed in a violent reality. 800 enemy troops were preparing to assault his position, believing they faced an undermanned defensive force they could overwhelm through concentrated firepower and aggressive tactics. None of them understood they were walking into a trap designed by someone who had studied their commander's psychology with scientific precision. Martinez tightened her grip on her weapon, her breathing controlled through techniques drilled into every Marine during basic training. "Here they come, Sarge." Davis watched the first enemy elements begin their advance, weapons ready and formations tight as they moved toward objectives their leadership had identified as vulnerable. The trap was set, the psychological manipulation complete, and in minutes the Marine Corps would demonstrate that tactical innovation could achieve what conventional doctrine never attempted. "Hold fire," he transmitted to his team, knowing those words represented the hardest order any of them would ever follow. "Let them come." Captain Chun owns this fight, and she's about to show them why Marines don't retreat from superior numbers. "We stay right here because this is exactly where we're supposed to be." The enemy advanced with professional efficiency, closing the distance toward a defensive position that appeared increasingly vulnerable with each meter they gained. Davis knew Chun watched from the operations center, her hand hovering over the execute order that would transform apparent weakness into overwhelming lethality. The next few minutes would prove whether tactical psychology could overcome 8-tune numerical superiority through nothing more than precise timing and absolute discipline. The enemy reached 300 meters, then 250. The psychological pressure intensified with each meter they closed. Every Marine in the forward position fighting trained instinct while trusting a plan that defied every conventional doctrine they had learned. Chen's hands hovered over the tactical display as enemy forces reached 200 meters, the compression of distance triggering every instinct that screamed to authorize defensive fire. Major Patterson stood directly beside her, his body language radiating tension as hostile troops closed to ranges that violated every conventional doctrine he had learned in 20 years of service. "Captain, those forces are at 200 meters. Patterson's voice carried the authority of someone prepared to exercise override capability. "I'm recommending immediate authorization for Davis to engage." "Not yet, sir." Chun watched the thermal overlay showing enemy formations concentrating exactly as her calculations predicted. They're still dispersed across 3 approach vectors. We need them concentrated in the primary kill zone at 150 meters. You're asking Marines to hold fire while 800 hostiles close to small arms range. Patterson moved closer to the communications panel. That's beyond acceptable risk parameters. Colonel Briggs stepped forward, his concern evident despite his earlier conditional acceptance of the tactical plan. Captain Shun, enemy forces are beginning to employ suppressive fire on the forward position. Davis is reporting incoming rounds impacting his barriers. Shun pulled up the live feed from Davis's position camera, watching muzzle flashes from enemy weapons as they began engaging what they perceived as an isolated defensive position. The suppressive fire is part of their standard assault doctrine. They're softening the target before the final push. She highlighted the enemy formations on the display. Look at their concentration pattern. They're funneling into the center kill zone exactly as predicted. Patterson's hand moved to the override authorization panel. I'm calling this, Captain. Those Marines are taking fire, and you're asking them to sit exposed while their position gets pounded. Shin turned to face him directly, her voice urgent but controlled. Sir, if we engage now, the enemy disperses and we lose 70% of our effectiveness. Give me 2 more minutes. They're almost at optimal concentration. 2 minutes is a lifetime under fire. Patterson activated the communications channel to the forward position. Sergeant Davis, this is Major Patterson. Prepare to authorize defensive fire on my command. Davis's response came through with rounds audible in the background. Sir, we're holding position per Captain Shen's orders. We can maintain for 2 more minutes. Negative, Sergeant. Patterson's finger moved toward the authorization key. I'm exercising tactical oversight authority. Prepare to engage enemy forces at will. Chun felt her tactical plan collapsing as command authority prepared to override her carefully calculated timeline. Sir, I'm requesting you hold that order. Enemy forces are at 175 meters and concentrating. 30 more seconds gets them into optimal kill zone geometry. Briggs pulled up casualty projections, the data showing risk levels climbing with each passing second. Captain, the mathematical risk to Davis's team increases exponentially below 200 meters. Major Patterson's concerns are tactically valid. General Morrow's voice cut through the operations center from the observation deck, his presence unnoticed until he spoke. Major Patterson, hold that override order. The Major straightened, his hand moving away from the communications panel, though his expression showed disagreement with the General's intervention. Sir, those Marines are exposed to direct fire at ranges that compromise their defensive capability. Morrow descended to the operations floor, his attention fixed on the tactical display where enemy formations continued their advance. Captain Shun, you have advocated for this plan with absolute confidence. How much longer until your trigger point? 45 seconds, sir. Chen highlighted the kill zone concentration overlay. Enemy forces are funneling into the primary engagement area. Artillery has firing solutions locked. Sniper teams have optimal sight lines. We're 15 meters from perfect execution. The general studied the display for a moment that stretched into tactical eternity, while enemy forces closed the final distance toward the concentration point that would determine success or failure. He turned to Patterson directly. Major, you maintain override authority, but I'm ordering you to give Captain Shun those 45 seconds. If enemy concentration deviates from her projections in that time, exercise your authority immediately. Patterson acknowledged the order with visible reluctance, his attention locked on the live feed, showing enemy forces now at 160 meters. Captain Shun, you have your time window. But if anything deviates from your predictions, I'm authorizing immediate defensive engagement. Chen returned her focus to the tactical display, watching enemy formations compress into the kill zone with precision that validated 18 days of pattern analysis. Artillery teams stand by for execute order. Sniper positions confirm target acquisition across all designated zones. Williams transmitted from the elevated positions. Sniper 1 confirming target-rich environment across all 3 kill boxes. We have clear sight lines on 600-plus hostiles. Awaiting your execute command. The fire control officer provided artillery status. All batteries ready. Fire missions programmed and verified. Awaiting authorization. Enemy forces reached 155 meters. Their formations concentrated in the 3 kill zones with density that exceeded Chen's most optimistic projections. Davis transmitted from the forward position. Incoming fire audible, but his voice steady. Forward position holding. Enemy at 150 meters and massing for final assault. Ready for your order, Captain. Chun watched the tactical clock count down the final seconds. Enemy forces positioned exactly where her calculations predicted they would be at this moment. Patterson stood 3 feet away, his authority absolute if she had miscalculated any element of the tactical situation. Briggs monitored casualty risk projections that climbed with each passing second. General Morrow observed with the kind of focused attention that came from understanding careers and lives balanced on the next 30 seconds. The enemy commander transmitted orders audible through intercepted communications, his voice confident as he directed his forces to overrun what he perceived as a collapsing defensive position. Qasim believed victory was seconds away, his entire force committed to destroying 12 Marines who appeared increasingly vulnerable with each meter his troops advanced. Chen's hand moved to the execute authorization as enemy forces reached 150 meters with concentration density at 92% of optimal projections. Every artillery battery waited for her command. 16 snipers held fire with targets acquired. Davis and his team maintained discipline despite incoming fire impacting their barriers. The entire ambush architecture waited for the single word that would transform tactical theory into violent execution. Enemy forces at 150 meters centered in primary kill zone. Chun transmitted across all tactical frequencies simultaneously, her voice carrying absolute certainty. All elements, execute, execute, execute. Artillery batteries fired within 2 seconds of her command, 3 separate fire missions launching toward predetermined coordinates with timing precision that represented weeks of preparation. The operations center fell silent as everyone watched the tactical display track outgoing rounds toward targets that had no awareness the trap had just triggered. Patterson watched the artillery tracks converge on enemy positions, his expression shifting from concern to recognition that Chen's timing had achieved the concentration she promised. Briggs monitored the fire mission execution, seeing Chen's tactical architecture transform from theory to devastating reality. General Morrow observed without comment, his experience recognizing the moment tactical innovation proved itself through results rather than projections. The first artillery rounds would impact in 8 seconds. Enemy forces remained concentrated in kill zones, unaware their assault had just ended before it began. Davis and his Marines held their positions, knowing the trap they had helped set was about to eliminate 800 hostile troops in the opening seconds of an engagement their enemy never understood was an ambush rather than a defensive battle. Chun watched the countdown, understanding that the next few minutes would validate or destroy everything she had calculated. Patterson stood ready to override if the execution failed. But the mathematics were perfect, the timing precise, and Major Qasim's entire force was positioned exactly where she had predicted they would be when the Marine Corps demonstrated that tactical psychology could achieve overwhelming victory through nothing more than patience, discipline, and absolute understanding of enemy behavior patterns. The first artillery rounds impacted the primary kill zone with precision that transformed the battlefield from tactical movement to chaos in less than 3 seconds. Davis watched through his scope as the coordinated fire mission struck all 3 enemy concentrations simultaneously, the explosions erupting among formations that had no warning and no time to disperse. Execute secondary fire mission. Chen's voice transmitted across tactical frequencies as the initial salvo achieved its purpose. Sniper teams engaged designated targets. Forward position authorized defensive fire. Williams and his 16 snipers opened fire from their concealed positions, each shooter engaging predetermined targets with the kind of methodical precision that came from optimal sight lines and unprepared enemy forces. Davis watched enemy commanders attempting to organize response while artillery continued pounding their positions with sustained fire that prevented any coordinated reaction. Martinez engaged targets advancing through the impact zone, her shots disciplined and accurate as enemy soldiers stumbled through smoke and debris. They're trying to retreat, Sarge. Western column is breaking formation. Chun had predicted retreat attempts. Davis reminded himself as he engaged targets in his designated sector. Artillery teams shift fire to retreat corridors. Cut them off before they can organize fallback positions. The fire control officer executed the program's sequence, artillery impacts walking across terrain features that enemy forces would use for retreat. The tactical display showed enemy formations fragmenting as soldiers attempted individual survival rather than unit cohesion. Casualty indicators climbed rapidly as the ambush architecture functioned exactly as Chun had designed. Enemy command vehicle is attempting to withdraw. Williams transmitted target identification from his elevated position. I have clear shot on what appears to be senior leadership. Engage. Chun authorized the sniper team to prioritize command elements. Eliminate their coordination capability. The operations center monitored multiple data streams simultaneously. Thermal imaging showing enemy forces trapped between forward Marine positions and artillery fire while attempting retreat into zones covered by sniper teams. Patterson stood beside Chun, his earlier skepticism replaced by recognition of tactical execution that exceeded conventional doctrine. Casualty count passing 400. The intelligence officer updated numbers based on thermal signature analysis. Enemy formations completely disrupted. No organized resistance remaining. Davis watched the battlefield transform from assault to rout as enemy soldiers abandoned equipment and scattered across terrain that offered no effective cover from coordinated Marine fire. Martinez tracked targets attempting to use destroyed vehicles for concealment, her shots eliminating threats before they could organize defensive positions. Forward position advancing to secure enemy casualties. Davis transmitted his intention before moving his team into pursuit phase. Enemy forces are completely broken. We're encountering no return fire. Chun monitored the tactical situation, recognizing the moment when ambush transitioned to exploitation. All elements maintain fire discipline. Sniper teams continue engaging targets of opportunity. Artillery shift to blocking positions on northern retreat route. The sustained engagement continued for 7 minutes total. Marine forces methodically eliminating enemy combatants who had entered the kill zones, expecting to overrun a vulnerable defensive position, but instead encountered the most sophisticated ambush most of them would never survive. Equipment burned across the battlefield. Destroyed vehicles marking positions where concentrated formations had existed moments before. Williams reported from the sniper positions. Sniper 1 confirming enemy forces no longer presenting organized resistance. I count multiple small groups attempting individual withdrawal. Engaging remaining targets. Cease fire on retreating individuals. Chun made the tactical decision to terminate active engagement. Forward position begin securing casualties and equipment. Artillery teams stand down but maintain ready status. The battlefield fell into relative quiet punctuated by secondary explosions and the sound of burning equipment. Davis moved through the kill zone with his team, securing weapons and processing enemy soldiers who had survived the initial ambush. Martinez counted casualties in her sector, the numbers validating the devastating effectiveness of Chen's tactical plan. Sarge, I'm counting over 200 casualties in just this kill zone. Martinez transmitted her assessment while securing abandoned equipment. The other zones must have similar numbers. Chen's calculations predicted 75% casualties in the first 8 minutes. Davis surveyed the destruction, recognizing how perfect timing and optimal positioning had achieved results that conventional engagement could never match. She was right about everything. The operations center received preliminary casualty assessments from all 3 kill zones, the combined numbers confirming the ambush had achieved its purpose with precision that exceeded even optimistic projections. Patterson reviewed the data, his expression showing professional respect for tactical execution that had proven his concerns unfounded. Preliminary count indicates 630 enemy casualties across all engagement zones. The intelligence officer provided updated numbers based on field reports and thermal analysis. An additional 87 captured, 43 wounded and secured. Estimated 50 to 70 enemy personnel escaped primary engagement area. Briggs studied the casualty figures against Marine losses, the comparison demonstrating the overwhelming effectiveness of Chen's unconventional approach. 0 Marine casualties. Minimal ammunition expenditure relative to enemy eliminated. Captain Chen, your tactical plan achieved results beyond any conventional engagement scenario. Chen monitored live feeds from the battlefield, watching Davis and other Marine teams secure the area while helicopter support arrived to assist with casualty processing. The ambush had functioned exactly as her analysis predicted, enemy psychology and terrain manipulation combining to create tactical conditions where numerical superiority became a liability rather than an advantage. General Morrow descended to the operations floor, his attention fixed on the tactical summary displaying final engagement results. Captain, I want a complete after-action report within 6 hours. This operation will be studied by every tactical command in the Marine Corps. Davis transmitted from the forward position, his voice carrying the kind of satisfaction that came from surviving combat through superior planning rather than superior firepower. Forward position secure. Enemy command vehicle located and searched. Major Qasim evacuated on foot approximately 4 minutes into engagement. We found his maps and communication equipment. Chun felt vindication settle across her shoulders, understanding that every element of her plan had executed perfectly. Enemy commander fled when he realized his entire tactical approach had been anticipated and countered. Secure all intelligence materials for analysis. Patterson moved beside her, extending his hand in acknowledgement of tactical excellence. Captain, I opposed significant elements of your plan. I was wrong. You achieved decisive victory through tactical innovation that I didn't fully understand until I watched it execute. Chun accepted the recognition with professional grace, understanding that Patterson's skepticism had been justified by conventional standards. The plan worked because we understood enemy psychology better than conventional doctrine assumes. Major Qasim is a brilliant tactical commander executing proven strategies that made him predictable to someone willing to design an ambush around his specific patterns. The operations center began processing the flood of data generated by the engagement, Marines in the field documenting enemy equipment and casualties while intelligence officers analyzed capture materials. The ambush had eliminated approximately 80% of Qasim's force in under 8 minutes, achieving strategic impact that would ripple through enemy command structures for months. Davis supervised his team as they completed battlefield security, the forward position that had appeared vulnerable now revealed as the trigger mechanism in a weapon system that had destroyed an entire enemy battalion. Martinez worked beside him, processing the psychological impact of participating in tactical innovation that had achieved overwhelming victory through patience rather than firepower. Williams and his sniper teams descended from their elevated positions, their precise fire having eliminated command elements and retreat attempts with efficiency that conventional engagement rarely achieved. The entire ambush architecture had functioned as a coordinated system, every element executing its designated purpose at precisely calculated moments. Chun pulled up the final tactical summary, numbers confirming what battlefield reports already demonstrated. The Marine Corps had achieved decisive victory against numerically superior forces through nothing more than tactical psychology, optimal positioning, and absolute discipline. Major Qasim had walked 800 troops into a trap designed by someone who understood his decision-making process better than he understood it himself. The enemy commander had believed he was exploiting Marine weakness. Instead, he had followed a script written 18 days earlier by a captain who recognized that tactical innovation required understanding not just terrain and weapons, but human psychology and the patterns that successful commanders develop through repeated victory. Qasim's confidence had become his greatest vulnerability, and Shin had designed an ambush that transformed that vulnerability into catastrophic defeat. Major Qasim stumbled through the ravine 3 kilometers from where his command vehicle burned among the wreckage of his battalion, his uniform torn and his radio equipment abandoned in the chaos of retreat. The sounds of artillery had finally ceased, replaced by a silence that felt more oppressive than the sustained bombardment that had destroyed his forces in minutes. Lieutenant Farouk emerged from cover ahead, his face showing the kind of shock that came from surviving what should have been certain death. "Sir, I found 12 others from the 2nd Company. They're scattered across 2 kilometers with no equipment and no communication capability." Qasim dropped against a rock formation, his tactical training struggling to process the catastrophic failure of an operation that had appeared certain of success. We walked into a trap. Everything we observed, every weakness we identified, it was deliberately positioned to make us commit our forces exactly where they wanted us. Farouk moved closer, his voice carrying confusion that matched his commander's disbelief. "Sir, their forward position appeared undermanned. Our scouts confirmed minimal defensive strength. The intelligence was accurate. The intelligence showed us exactly what they intended us to see." Qasim replayed the engagement in his mind, recognizing details that should have triggered suspicion but had instead confirmed his tactical assumptions. That position was bait in a sophisticated ambush. They let us approach because they wanted us concentrated in predetermined kill zones. The lieutenant studied the terrain behind them, where smoke still rose from the battlefield, the scale of destruction visible even at distance. How did they coordinate artillery across 3 separate locations simultaneously? That kind of timing requires planning we should have detected. Qasim understood the tactical sophistication now, though recognition came too late to prevent the destruction of 800 troops under his command. They planned this engagement days or weeks in advance. Every element was positioned and coordinated before we even began our approach. He pulled off his helmet, feeling the weight of complete tactical failure. We didn't assault a defensive position. We performed exactly as their commander predicted we would. Farouk helped his commander to his feet, recognizing they needed to continue moving before Marine search teams expanded their operational radius. "Sir, we need to reach friendly lines. The Americans will be hunting survivors." Qasim nodded, forcing his tactical mind to shift from analyzing defeat to ensuring the survival of the few troops who had escaped the kill zones. "How many did we lose?" The lieutenant's expression provided the answer before his words confirmed it. "Based on what I saw before the retreat, sir, I estimate 70 to 80% casualties. Most of our vehicles destroyed, all heavy weapons lost, command structure completely disrupted. This was total defeat." The 2 officers moved through terrain that provided concealment, while Qasim processed the implications of losing his entire operational capability in a single engagement. His reputation as a tactical commander had been built through 14 victories achieved by identifying enemy weakness and exploiting it through concentrated force. That same approach, executed against an opponent who understood his psychology, had resulted in the worst defeat of his military career. Farouk paused at an observation point, scanning for pursuit forces before continuing. "Sir, how did their commander know we would concentrate our assault?" Standard doctrine calls for multiple approach vectors with dispersed formations. "Because she understood that my success came from aggressive concentration." Qasim recognized the gender-specific terminology in intercepted Marine communications he had monitored during the approach. Their tactical commander is female. She studied my engagement history and designed an ambush specifically targeting my decision-making patterns. The lieutenant absorbed that information with visible difficulty, his traditional assumptions about military capability challenged by the reality of overwhelming defeat. A female officer designed the operation that destroyed our battalion? Qasim felt anger compete with professional respect for tactical excellence that had outmaneuvered him completely. Gender is irrelevant when someone demonstrates superior tactical innovation. She predicted every decision I made because she understood my pattern of successful operations better than I understood them myself. He continued moving, each step carrying him further from the battlefield where his confidence had been transformed into catastrophic miscalculation. They reached a defensive position where additional survivors had gathered, the group totaling perhaps 40 troops from a force that had numbered 800 that morning. Soldiers showed varying degrees of shock, many having abandoned equipment to facilitate escape. Qasim recognized the psychological impact of surviving an ambush that had eliminated the majority of their unit. A sergeant approached with the kind of deference that came from recognizing command authority even in defeat. "Sir, we have no communication equipment, limited weapons, and enemy forces are likely expanding search operations. What are your orders?" Qasim assessed his remaining force, understanding they represented fragments of a battalion that had ceased to exist as an effective military unit. "We move north in small groups to minimize detection probability. Avoid contact with any Marine forces. Our mission is survival and reaching friendly lines where we can report what happened here." The sergeant acknowledged the orders, moving to organize the survivors into movement groups. Qasim watched his remaining troops prepare for withdrawal, each face showing awareness that they had participated in a defeat that would be studied and analyzed by military commands throughout the region. Farouk remained beside his commander, his voice quiet as other soldiers moved out of immediate hearing range. "Sir, this defeat will have strategic implications beyond our battalion. Command won't understand how we lost so completely." Qasim knew the analysis would focus on his decision to concentrate forces against what appeared to be a vulnerable position, his tactical choice to commit overwhelming strength to exploit perceived weakness. "Tell them the Americans have commanders who understand tactical psychology as well as they understand weapons and terrain. Tell them we faced an opponent who designed an ambush around specific predictions of our behavior, and those predictions proved accurate to within meters and seconds." The lieutenant nodded, understanding his commander was already crafting the after-action assessment that would attempt to extract lessons from comprehensive failure. "What should we recommend for future operations against Marine positions?" "Assume nothing about their defensive weakness." Qasim spoke from painful recognition of how assumptions had led to disaster. "If a position appears vulnerable, assume that appearance is deliberate and designed to manipulate our tactical decisions." The Americans demonstrated they're willing to accept risk that seems irrational by conventional doctrine, which makes them unpredictable using standard analytical frameworks. The survivors began their withdrawal in dispersed groups, moving through terrain that would conceal their movement while allowing progress toward friendly lines. Qasim took a final look at the smoke rising from the battlefield, understanding that location marked the end of his reputation as a successful tactical commander. Farouk moved beside him, preparing to begin their own withdrawal. "Sir, you achieved 14 victories before this defeat. One engagement doesn't define your entire career." Qasim appreciated the loyalty, but recognized the reality that military command operated on recent performance rather than historical success. "This one engagement eliminated 80% of my battalion against an opponent who suffered 0 casualties. That defines tactical failure completely." He turned away from the battlefield, beginning the movement that would carry him away from the site of his greatest defeat. The Marine commander who designed this ambush understood something I failed to recognize. Success creates patterns, and patterns create vulnerabilities for opponents intelligent enough to recognize and exploit them. The two officers moved into the terrain that would provide their escape route, each step carrying Qasim further from confidence built through repeated victory, but destroyed through a single engagement against someone who had turned his strengths into fatal weaknesses. The female Marine captain had achieved what no previous opponent had managed, demonstrating that tactical innovation could overcome numerical superiority through nothing more than understanding human psychology and the behavioral patterns that successful commanders develop. Behind them, the battlefield continued burning, physical evidence of what happened when traditional tactical doctrine encountered an opponent willing to design operations around psychological manipulation rather than conventional force deployment. 800 troops had entered those kill zones expecting victory. Fewer than 50 had escaped, and those survivors carried the knowledge that they had been outmaneuvered by someone who understood their commander better than he understood himself. The operations center erupted in controlled celebration as final casualty reports confirmed the unprecedented success of Chen's tactical plan. Officers who had watched the engagement with skepticism now studied the data with professional admiration for results that exceeded any conventional doctrine expectations. Colonel Briggs approached Chen with his hand extended, his earlier resistance replaced by unqualified respect. "Captain, I opposed elements of your plan because they violated every conventional approach I learned in 30 years of service. You just demonstrated why innovation matters more than tradition." Chen accepted the acknowledgement while maintaining focus on post-engagement procedures, her tactical mind already processing lessons and refinements for future operations. "Sir, the plan worked because we committed to understanding enemy psychology as thoroughly as we understood terrain and weapons. Qasim was predictable because we studied him as carefully as he should have studied us." General Morrow descended to the operations floor where tactical displays showed Marines securing the battlefield and processing captured equipment. The atmosphere reflected vindication for everyone who had trusted Chen's unconventional approach, despite the risk inherent in allowing enemy forces to close to distances that conventional doctrine considered suicidal. "Captain Chen, I'm authorizing immediate after-action documentation." Morrow gestured toward the displays showing engagement timeline and casualty ratios. "This operation will become required study material at every Marine tactical training facility. You achieved decisive victory against 8-2 numerical superiority with 0 friendly casualties." Major Patterson moved beside them, his demeanor showing the kind of professional grace that came from acknowledging when initial skepticism proved unfounded. "Sir, I request permission to personally write the tactical oversight assessment. Captain Chen's plan succeeded despite my concerns, and that success deserves documentation that acknowledges how thoroughly my conventional analysis missed the operational innovation she demonstrated." Chen appreciated the integrity while recognizing that Patterson's concerns had been tactically valid by traditional standards. "Major, your oversight ensured I maintained rigorous discipline throughout the planning and execution phases. The plan worked partially because I knew any deviation would trigger immediate override." Davis transmitted from a forward position where Marines continued processing battlefield remnants. Operations Center, forward position reports 0 Marine casualties and minimal ammunition expenditure. We've secured approximately 200 enemy weapons, 12 vehicles, and extensive communication equipment. The enemy left everything behind when they fled. Rodriguez entered the operations center carrying preliminary intelligence assessments based on capture materials. "Captain, we found Qasim's operational plans in his abandoned command vehicle. His assault timeline matches your predictions within 3 minutes. He committed his entire force exactly as you calculated." Chun studied the captured documents, recognizing validation of psychological analysis that had formed the foundation of her tactical plan. He followed patterns established through 14 successful engagements. His confidence in those patterns prevented him from recognizing deliberate manipulation until the trap had already triggered. Briggs examined the enemy operational documents with professional interest in how accurately Chun had anticipated their approach. "You predicted not just their tactical decisions, but their timing and formation density. How did you achieve that level of analytical precision? Chun pulled up the psychological assessment framework she had developed through weeks of studying Qasim's engagement history. Successful commanders develop decision-making patterns reinforced through repeated victory. Qasim achieved his success through aggressive exploitation of perceived weakness that made him vulnerable to anyone willing to present weakness as deliberate bait. The intelligence officer provided updated battlefield assessment based on thermal imaging and prisoner interrogation. Final casualty count indicates 630 enemy killed, 87 captured, 43 wounded and secured. Estimated 40 to 50 escaped the engagement area. Enemy force suffered approximately 94% casualties or capture. Patterson studied the numbers with visible recognition of tactical effectiveness that conventional engagement could never achieve. Captain, standard defensive doctrine against 800 hostiles would project Marine casualties between 15 and 30% even with tactical advantage. You achieve complete victory with 0 losses. Chun understood the statistical validation while recognizing the human cost represented by 630 enemy casualties. The plan succeeded because we controlled every variable that mattered: terrain, timing, enemy psychology, weapons coordination. Qasim never had a chance to employ his tactical skill because we decided the engagement parameters before he understood he was fighting an ambush rather than assaulting a defensive position. General Morrow directed his aide to begin documentation procedures that would transform the engagement into institutional knowledge. I want this operation analyzed by Strategic Command within 48 hours. Captain Chen's tactical innovation represents evolution in how we approach defensive operations against numerically superior forces. Davis transmitted final battlefield security confirmation. Operation Center area is secure. All enemy casualties processed, captured personnel transferred to detention facilities, intelligence materials cataloged and ready for analysis. Forward position requests permission to stand down from tactical alert. Chun authorized the status change while monitoring ongoing activities across the operational area. Forward position authorized to stand down. Maintains standard security protocols, but tactical engagement phase is complete. She turned to the assembled officers who had witnessed the execution of doctrine that would reshape Marine tactical thinking. The engagement succeeded because we committed to rigorous psychological analysis and accepted risk that conventional thinking considers unacceptable. Briggs moved to the tactical summary display. His attention focused on engagement timeline, showing how compressed execution had been. From execute order to complete enemy collapse took 7 minutes 40 seconds. That's faster than most conventional engagements achieve initial contact. The speed came from optimal positioning achieved before enemy forces understood they were entering kill zones. Chun highlighted the concentration patterns that had made simultaneous engagement across 3 zones devastatingly effective. Conventional doctrine engages at maximum range and sustains contact over extended duration. We compressed the entire engagement into the time required to spring the trap and eliminate concentrated forces before they could disperse. Patterson reviewed the tactical communications log showing command decisions throughout the engagement. Captain, at what point were you certain the plan would succeed? When enemy forces reached 200 meters, you showed absolute confidence despite my override concerns. Chun considered the question, recognizing the moment when tactical theory had transformed into certain knowledge. When enemy scouts reported our defensive gaps, and Qasim accelerated his advance timeline. That behavioral change proved he was reacting emotionally to perceived opportunity rather than analytically assessing potential manipulation. Confident commanders make predictable decisions. Rodriguez approached with additional intelligence analysis based on interrogation of captured enemy officers. Captain, prisoners confirmed Qasim believed he was exploiting Marine defensive weakness. Multiple officers stated their commander was certain of victory based on reconnaissance showing our undermanned forward position. That confirmation validated every psychological assessment Shun had made during the planning phase. Qasim saw exactly what we wanted him to see, interpreted it exactly as we predicted, and made decisions that followed the script we wrote for him. The ambush succeeded because we understood his decision-making process better than he understood our defensive capabilities. General Morrow prepared to depart for command briefing, where he would present results to theater leadership. Captain Shun, I'm recommending formal commendation for tactical innovation that achieved strategic impact. You eliminated enemy operational capability in this sector for months. He paused at the exit, his final comment carrying weight of institutional recognition. You also demonstrated that Marine tactical doctrine can evolve beyond conventional approaches when commanded by officers willing to think beyond tradition. The Operations Center began transitioning from tactical engagement to analytical assessment, officers documenting every element of the operation for future study and replication. Shun felt vindication tempered by awareness that 630 enemy soldiers had died because she had understood their commander's psychology with scientific precision. Davis and his Marines returned from the battlefield, their expressions showing the kind of satisfaction that came from surviving combat through superior planning rather than superior firepower. Martinez approached Shun directly, her voice carrying respect earned through shared risk. Captain, I want to thank you for designing a plan that brought all of us home. Standing in that forward position while 800 hostiles approached tested every bit of discipline we had. Shun met the corporal's eyes with acknowledgement of courage that had made tactical theory executable reality. You and Sergeant Davis maintained perfect discipline under conditions that defied every instinct. The plan worked because Marines trusted analysis over emotion and followed orders that seemed suicidal but were actually calculated for your survival. Strategic Command reviewed the operational footage for the third time in 48 hours. Senior officers studying engagement sequences that demonstrated tactical innovation beyond conventional Marine doctrine. Colonel Briggs sat beside Shun in the analysis briefing room, watching his initial skepticism play out on recorded communications while enemy forces advanced toward their destruction. Captain Shun, your after-action report indicates you began psychological profiling of Major Qasim 18 days before the engagement. Brigadier General Marcus paused the footage at the moment artillery rounds first impacted. Walk us through how personality assessment translated into tactical planning at this level of precision. Shun pulled up the behavioral analysis framework that had formed the foundation of her operational design. Qasim's engagement history showed consistent pattern recognition across 16 operations. He identified defensive weakness, concentrated overwhelming force, achieved decisive victory before enemy reinforcement. That success created predictable decision-making when confronted with apparent vulnerability. The general studied the pattern analysis, displaying Qasim's tactical choices mapped across multiple engagements. You designed an entire ambush around the assumption he would continue following successful patterns. What would have happened if he had deviated from your predictions? We had contingency protocols for 7 different tactical variations. Shun displayed the alternative engagement plans that had been prepared for enemy approaches that differed from primary projections. But psychological assessment indicated 92% probability he would follow his established pattern when presented with target that matched his successful engagement profile. A lieutenant colonel from Tactical Doctrine Command leaned forward, his attention focused on the compression of engagement timeline. Your plan required enemy forces to approach within 150 meters before triggering the ambush. Explain the tactical reasoning that justified accepting that level of risk. Shun brought up the concentration analysis showing enemy density at various distances. At 300 meters, enemy forces remained dispersed across 3 separate approach vectors with capability to retreat or disperse if engaged. At 150 meters, they were concentrated in predetermined kill zones with limited reaction time and restricted movement options. She highlighted the casualty projections that validated the closer engagement distance. Conventional engagement at 300 meters projects 40 to 60% enemy casualties over sustained duration. Our approach achieved 94% casualties in under 8 minutes. Briggs provided command perspective on the operational decision-making that had authorized Chen's unconventional approach. General, I initially opposed Captain Chen's plan because it violated fundamental doctrine about engagement ranges and force protection. Her analysis proved correct at every decision point, but I want to emphasize the command tension inherent in authorizing such deviation from established procedures. Marcus nodded, recognizing the institutional resistance that innovation required overcoming. Colonel, your concern was tactically valid by conventional standards. The question we're addressing today is whether Captain Chen's success represents replicable innovation or exceptional circumstance that succeeded through favorable conditions. Chen understood the institutional question, knowing her tactical approach would either become doctrine or remain classified as unique success. Sir, the methodology is replicable against any opponent whose tactical patterns can be analyzed through historical engagement data. We're not talking about luck or exceptional circumstance. We're discussing systematic psychological assessment integrated with terrain analysis and weapons coordination. 3 battalion commanders from different operational theaters attended the briefing via secure video conference, their presence indicating institutional interest in tactical innovation that achieved results beyond conventional capability. The senior commander from 2nd Battalion posed the critical question. Captain, how do we train this capability across the Marine Corps? Psychological profiling at the level you demonstrated requires analytical skill beyond standard tactical training. Chen had anticipated the training question, understanding that methodology without replication protocols remain theoretical rather than institutional. We established psychological assessment as fundamental component of tactical planning equivalent to terrain analysis and logistics coordination. Every engagement begins with study of enemy command patterns, historical decision-making, and behavioral indicators that suggest predictable responses to specific tactical situations. The briefing room settled into focused attention as Chen outlined framework for transforming individual innovation into institutional capability. Rodriguez assisted by pulling up training protocols they had developed during post-engagement analysis sessions. Marcus examined the training framework with professional interest in how tactical education could integrate psychological warfare components. Captain, you're proposing fundamental revision to how Marines approach defensive operations. That represents significant institutional shift from doctrine developed over decades of combat experience. Chun met the general's assessment with confidence earned through results that spoke louder than theoretical arguments. Sir, conventional doctrine projects Marine casualties between 15 and 30% when facing numerically superior forces in defensive operations. My approach achieved 0 casualties while eliminating 94% of enemy forces. Those results justify institutional consideration of methodology that produces such tactical advantage. The lieutenant colonel from Doctrine Command reviewed casualty comparisons across multiple engagement scenarios. Captain Chen's numbers are validated by battlefield results. The question becomes whether success against Qasim translates to effectiveness against opponents with different tactical profiles. Chen pulled up psychological assessment matrices applicable to various enemy command styles beyond Qasim's aggressive approach. The methodology adapts to different behavioral patterns. Aggressive commanders like Qasim respond to apparent weakness. Cautious commanders respond to apparent strength that reveals exploitable gaps. Analytical commanders respond to tactical contradictions that suggest planning errors. Each profile requires different manipulation approach, but underlying principle remains constant. Briggs watched Chun present doctrine revision that would reshape Marine tactical training across multiple combat specializations. General Marcus, I recommend Strategic Command authorized pilot program implementing Captain Chen's methodology across 3 battalion-level training exercises. Results will demonstrate replicability beyond single successful engagement. Marcus considered the proposal, his experience recognizing both innovation potential and institutional resistance to fundamental doctrine change. Approved. Captain Chun will design training scenarios for 2nd, 5th, and 7th battalions. We'll evaluate results across different terrain conditions and enemy tactical profiles. He turned to Chun directly. Captain, you have 90 days to demonstrate your methodology produces consistent tactical advantage across varied operational conditions. Chun acknowledged the assignment, understanding she now carried responsibility for proving tactical innovation could become institutional capability rather than individual success. Sir, the training scenarios will include psychological profiling protocols, terrain manipulation techniques, and engagement timing frameworks. Each battalion will execute ambush operations against simulated enemy forces led by commanders following different behavioral patterns. The briefing continued for 2 more hours, senior officers examining every element of Chen's tactical approach for components that could be extracted and systematized into training curriculum. Rodriguez provided technical support, displaying data visualizations that demonstrated how psychological assessment integrated with conventional tactical planning. Marcus concluded the session with formal recognition of strategic implications. Captain Chun, your operation eliminated enemy operational capability in critical sector and demonstrated tactical innovation that may reshape Marine defensive doctrine. I'm recommending you for Bronze Star with Valor for achievement that extends beyond single engagement success to strategic contribution. Chun accepted the recognition while maintaining focus on broader institutional impact. Sir, the commendation honors everyone who trusted unconventional analysis over traditional doctrine. Sergeant Davis and his team maintained discipline that made execution possible. Colonel Briggs authorized approach that violated his training and experience. Major Patterson provided oversight that ensured rigorous standards. The success belongs to institutional willingness to consider innovation. The video conference participants signed off, each carrying assignments to evaluate Chen's methodology within their respective commands. Briggs remained as the briefing room emptied, his expression showing professional satisfaction tempered by awareness of institutional challenges ahead. Colonel, the methodology works because it challenges fundamental assumptions about how we analyze enemy capabilities. Chun understood the resistance that innovation would encounter. Commanders trained in conventional doctrine will resist approaches that appear to increase risk even when analysis demonstrates superior results. Briggs nodded, his decades of experience recognizing truth in Chen's assessment. Captain, you've proven tactical innovation can achieve results that conventional approaches never attempted. Now you need to prove those results weren't dependent on unique circumstances or exceptional enemy commander. The next 90 days determine whether you discovered replicable doctrine or executed brilliant one-time success. Chun felt weight of institutional skepticism that success had earned her opportunity to address. Sir, Qasim wasn't exceptional. He was competent commander following patterns that produced repeated success. That's precisely why the methodology works. We're not exploiting unique enemy weakness. We're systematically analyzing behavioral patterns that all successful commanders develop, then designing operations that transform those patterns into vulnerabilities. The colonel studied the engagement footage frozen on the display, showing enemy forces concentrated in kill zones moments before artillery impacts. You changed how Marines think about defensive operations, Captain. Now you need to change how we train that thinking across the entire Corps. The ceremony took place 3 weeks after the engagement. Division command assembled in formal configuration while Chun stood at attention before General Morrow. Sergeant Davis and his forward position team occupied the front row, their presence representing the Marines who had executed tactical theory under conditions that tested every element of their training and discipline. Captain Maya Chun, for exceptionally meritorious achievement in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Morrow's voice carried across the assembled formation. reading the citation that documented tactical innovation beyond conventional Marine doctrine. On the date in question, Captain Chen designed and executed an ambush operation that eliminated approximately 800 enemy combatants while suffering 0 friendly casualties, demonstrating tactical excellence and leadership that achieved strategic impact extending beyond the immediate engagement. Chen maintained military bearing while processing the formal recognition. Understanding the ceremony represented institutional validation of methodology that had challenged fundamental assumptions about defensive operations. The Bronze Star with valor reflected not just successful execution, but acknowledgement that innovation deserved reward equivalent to conventional combat achievement. Your tactical plan required extraordinary discipline from Marines in forward positions who held fire, while numerically superior enemy forces closed at distances that violated every conventional engagement doctrine. Moreau continued the citation reading. Your psychological analysis of enemy command patterns achieved precision that enabled prediction of tactical decisions within minutes and meters, demonstrating analytical capability that represents evolution in how Marine commanders approach operational planning. Davis watched from the front row, his expression showing pride in participating in an operation that would be studied by Marines for years to come. Martinez sat beside him, her attention fixed on the captain who had designed a plan that brought every forward position Marine home despite psychological pressure that tested their absolute limits. The general pinned the Bronze Star on Chen's uniform. The physical weight of the medal representing institutional recognition earned through results that spoke louder than any traditional citation language. Your achievement exemplifies Marine Corps values of innovation, courage, and commitment to mission accomplishment through superior tactical thinking rather than simply superior firepower. Colonel Briggs stepped forward as Moreau completed the formal presentation. "Sir, I request permission to add personal observation to the official citation." The general nodded, recognizing Briggs's journey from skeptical resistance to complete acceptance of Chen's unconventional approach. The colonel turned to address the assembled formation directly. "I initially opposed significant elements of Captain Chen's tactical plan because they violated doctrine I learned over 30 years of Marine service." His voice carried the weight of professional integrity that demanded acknowledging when experience proved insufficient. "I was wrong." Captain Chen demonstrated that tactical innovation requires willingness to challenge assumptions, accept calculated risk, and trust analysis even when that analysis contradicts conventional wisdom. Every Marine in this formation should study her methodology because she achieved what traditional doctrine never attempted. The assembled Marines responded with the kind of focused attention that came from recognizing institutional evolution occurring in real time. Patterson stood among the senior officers, his presence representing oversight that had nearly aborted the operation before it achieved the results now being celebrated. Major Patterson approached Chen after the formal ceremony concluded, extending recognition that carried weight of initial skepticism transformed into professional respect. "Captain, I've drafted the tactical oversight report documenting how your plan succeeded despite my concerns. I'm recommending Strategic Command designate your operation as primary case study for psychological warfare integration into Marine tactical doctrine." Chen appreciated the integrity required for Patterson to formally document his own incorrect assessment. "Sir, your oversight ensured I maintained rigorous analytical standards throughout planning and execution. The methodology succeeds partially because it requires defending every assumption against skeptical evaluation." Rodriguez moved through the dispersing formation toward Chen, carrying documentation from the pilot training program now underway across 3 battalions. "Captain, preliminary results from 2nd Battalion training exercise show promising adaptation of your psychological profiling protocols. Their simulated ambush achieved 78% casualty projection against simulated enemy forces." Chen reviewed the preliminary data, recognizing both progress and areas requiring refinement. 78% demonstrates methodology transfers beyond my personal execution. The 16% gap between our results and their simulation probably reflects experience differential and training environment limitations. Davis approached with his forward position team, Marines who had trusted Chin's analysis while holding discipline under conditions that defied every instinct trained into them. Captain, I want to thank you for designing an operation that demonstrated Marines succeed through superior thinking as much as superior training. Standing in that position while 800 hostiles approached taught me more about tactical innovation than any classroom instruction. Chen met the sergeant's eyes with acknowledgement of courage that made tactical theory executable reality. Sergeant, your team maintained perfect discipline under psychological pressure that would break conventional units. The plan worked because Marines trusted analysis over emotion and followed orders that appeared suicidal, but were calculated for your survival and mission success. Martinez stepped forward, her expression showing the transformation from skeptical participant to advocate for methodology that had proven its value through results. Ma'am, I've been assigned to assist with 5th Battalion training implementation. I want to ensure the Marines learning this approach understand the psychological component from someone who experienced it in actual combat. Chun recognized the value of perspective from Marines who had executed the plan at ground level. Corporal, your participation in training scenarios will provide credibility that my theoretical instruction cannot match. You understand the discipline required to hold position while enemy forces close to ranges that trigger every survival instinct. General Morrow approached as the formal ceremony transitioned to informal recognition among the assembled Marines. Captain Shun, Strategic Command has authorized expansion of your pilot program to include 6 additional battalions. Your methodology is demonstrating replicability across varied operational scenarios and enemy tactical profiles. Shun felt vindication tempered by awareness that institutional adoption brought responsibility for ensuring methodology succeeded beyond her personal execution. Sir, the expanded program will require formalized training curriculum and standardized psychological assessment protocols. I'm requesting authorization to establish dedicated instruction cadre that can deploy across Marine tactical training facilities. Approved. Morrow's decision reflected institutional commitment to transformation Chun had initiated through single successful engagement. You have 60 days to develop curriculum and train initial instruction cadre. By the end of the fiscal year, every Marine tactical commander should have access to psychological warfare training equivalent to terrain analysis and logistics coordination. Briggs joined the conversation, his support representing conversion of initial skepticism into active advocacy. General, I'm recommending Captain Chun for promotion to Major with assignment to Tactical Doctrine Command. Her innovation deserves institutional position where she can influence Marine operational thinking at strategic level. Morrow considered the recommendation with professional assessment of career progression that balanced tactical achievement against institutional requirements. Agreed. Captain Chin's promotion to Major is approved effective immediately upon completion of current training program implementation. Her assignment to Doctrine Command will formalize psychological warfare integration into Marine tactical curriculum. Chun accepted the recognition while maintaining focus on operational requirements that transformation demanded. Sir, the curriculum development will include case studies beyond my engagement with Qasim. We need demonstrated effectiveness against different enemy command styles and varied operational environments to validate methodology as doctrine rather than exceptional circumstance. The general nodded, recognizing Chin's awareness that institutional skepticism required comprehensive validation. Major Chun, you have the resources and authority to develop that validation. The Marine Corps is investing in your innovation because results justify fundamental revision to how we approach defensive operations against numerically superior forces. Rodriguez approached with additional training data showing adaptation across different tactical scenarios. Ma'am, 7th Battalion simulation achieved 81% casualty projection using modified psychological profiling against simulated cautious enemy commander. The methodology adapts effectively to different behavioral patterns beyond Qasim's aggressive style. Chun reviewed the data with satisfaction that came from seeing methodology succeed beyond her personal execution. The framework works because it's systematic rather than intuitive. Any Marine with proper training can analyze enemy command patterns, identify exploitable behaviors, and design operations that transform those behaviors into tactical disadvantages. Davis and his team prepared to depart. Their participation in the ceremony representing recognition that tactical innovation required courage at every level from strategic planning to ground execution. Martinez paused before leaving, her final comment carrying weight of experience that would inform training implementation. Ma'am, when you designed the training curriculum, emphasize the psychological discipline required to hold position while threats approach. The technical elements are straightforward. The mental component tests Marines in ways conventional training doesn't prepare them for. Chun acknowledged the insight, recognizing truth in assessment from someone who had experienced the psychological pressure firsthand. Corporal, that psychological training will be a central component of curriculum development. Marines need to understand that tactical innovation requires discipline that goes beyond physical courage to include absolute trust in analysis, even when every instinct screams to act differently. The ceremony concluded with informal recognition among Marines who had participated in operation that would reshape tactical doctrine. Chun felt the weight of institutional responsibility that success had earned, understanding that her innovation now carried obligation to ensure methodology succeeded beyond single exceptional engagement and became a fundamental component of how Marines approached operations against any opponent whose patterns could be analyzed and exploited through psychological warfare integrated with conventional tactical planning. 6 months after the engagement that eliminated Qasim's battalion, Major Maya Chun stood before a classroom of 60 Marine tactical commanders at Quantico, her role as primary instructor for psychological warfare integration, representing institutional transformation that extended far beyond single successful operation. Conventional defensive doctrine assumes enemy forces behave rationally according to standard tactical principles. Chun displayed engagement footage from the operation that had validated her methodology. That assumption creates predictability in our own behavior that intelligent opponents can exploit. Today we're discussing how to reverse that dynamic by designing operations around enemy behavioral patterns rather than our own doctrinal preferences. The assembled commanders represented diverse operational experience across multiple theaters, their presence indicating Marine Corps commitment to incorporating psychological warfare as fundamental component of tactical planning. Lieutenant Morrison from 3rd Battalion raised the question Chun had anticipated since beginning the training program. Major, your success against Qasim demonstrated effectiveness against aggressive enemy commander. How does the methodology adapt to opponents who employ more cautious or defensive tactical approaches? Chun pulled up comparative analysis showing psychological profiling frameworks applicable to different command styles. Aggressive commanders respond to apparent weakness by concentrating force for decisive strike. Cautious commanders respond to apparent strength by identifying gaps they perceive as exploitable vulnerabilities. The manipulation approach differs, but underlying principle remains constant. We study historical patterns, predict behavioral responses, design operations that transform enemy strengths into exploitable weaknesses. Rodriguez, now Captain Rodriguez after his own promotion, assisted with tactical demonstrations showing methodology application across varied scenarios. The key insight Major Chun discovered is that successful commanders develop patterns through repeated victory. Those patterns create predictability when opponents understand the behavioral framework underlying tactical decisions. A colonel from Force Reconnaissance examined the training materials with professional skepticism that reminded Chun of Briggs's initial resistance. Major Chun, your methodology requires analytical capability beyond standard tactical training. How do we ensure battalion commanders can execute psychological profiling at operational level? Chun had developed systematic training protocols specifically to address that concern. Sir, we've established 3-tier training framework. Tier 1 provides basic psychological pattern recognition to all tactical commanders. Tier 2 develops advanced profiling capability for battalion-level planning officers. Tier 3 creates specialized psychological warfare planners who provide consultation support for complex operations. The system ensures capability exists at every command level. The classroom settled into focused instruction as Chun walked through actual case studies beyond her engagement with Qasim. 3 subsequent operations had successfully employed adapted versions of her methodology, achieving casualty ratios that validated replicability across different enemy forces and operational environments. 2nd Battalion executed modified ambush operation against enemy forces employing defensive tactics. Chun displayed the engagement analysis, showing how psychological profiling had been adapted to exploit cautious enemy behavior. Their commander identified enemy pattern of withdrawing when confronted with apparent superior force. 2nd Battalion designed operation that appeared to be aggressive assault, prompting enemy withdrawal into prepared kill zones. Result was 74% enemy casualties with minimal Marine losses. Morrison studied the 2nd Battalion case with recognition of methodology adaptation. They reversed your approach by presenting strength instead of weakness, but exploited the same principle of manipulating enemy behavioral patterns. Exactly. Chin highlighted the underlying framework that connected different tactical applications. Psychological warfare succeeds by understanding how enemy commanders think, predicting their decisions based on historical patterns, and designing operations where their most likely choices lead to their greatest disadvantages. The training session continued through detailed examination of psychological profiling techniques, pattern recognition frameworks, and operational design principles that transformed enemy behavioral analysis into tactical advantage. Chun felt satisfaction watching Marine commanders absorb methodology that 6 months earlier had existed only as unproven theory contradicting established doctrine. Davis entered the classroom during break period, his presence representing ground-level perspective that complemented Chin's strategic instruction. The commanders gathered around the sergeant, whose team had executed the forward position discipline that made Chin's original operation possible. What moment in this story had you on the edge of your seat? Let us know in the comments. Sergeant, these officers want to understand psychological pressure involved in holding fire while enemy forces approach within grenade range. The colonel from Force Reconnaissance directed his question to someone who had experienced the discipline required. How did your team maintain that level of control? Davis provided perspective that theoretical instruction could never match. Sir, we trusted Major Chin's analysis completely. She explained why the plan required enemy forces at 150 meters, how that distance created optimal kill zone concentration, and why premature engagement would collapse the entire ambush. We understood the reasoning, believed in her tactical assessment, and maintained discipline because we knew our survival depended on perfect execution. Chun watched Davis articulate the trust relationship between strategic planning and ground execution that successful operations required. The methodology works because it's comprehensive. We don't just analyze enemy psychology. We ensure our own Marines understand the operational logic so thoroughly that they can execute under conditions that defy conventional instinct. The afternoon session focused on practical application. Commanders working through simulated scenarios where they developed psychological profiles and designed operations exploiting identified patterns. Rodriguez monitored the exercises, providing feedback that helped translate theoretical concepts into executable tactical plans. Morrison's team developed profile of simulated enemy commander showing pattern of splitting forces when confronted with multiple threats. Their operational design presented apparent vulnerabilities in 2 locations. Predicting enemy would divide strength to exploit both opportunities simultaneously. The resulting plan achieved projected 82% casualties through coordinated ambush of divided enemy forces. Chun reviewed the exercise results with professional satisfaction. Lieutenant Morrison's team demonstrated core principle. They studied simulated enemy patterns, predicted behavioral response, designed operation that transformed enemy tactical decision into fatal mistake. That's psychological warfare integration at battalion level. The training program had expanded beyond initial pilot phase to become standard curriculum for Marine tactical commanders across all operational theaters. Williams, promoted to gunnery sergeant, now traveled between training facilities ensuring sniper integration with psychological warfare operations, maintained the precision that had proven decisive in the original engagement. Martinez, assigned to 5th Battalion as psychological warfare training specialist, worked with ground-level Marines who would execute the operations designed by commanders studying Chen's methodology. Her perspective from the forward position provided credibility that theoretical instruction lacked. Colonel Briggs visited the training facility during final session, his presence representing command validation of transformation he had initially resisted but now actively championed. Major Chun, Strategic Command, reports enemy forces across multiple theaters have modified their tactical approaches in response to Marine psychological warfare capabilities. Your methodology isn't just achieving battlefield success. It's forcing opponents to fundamentally reconsider how they engage Marine positions. Chun understood the strategic implication that her tactical innovation had achieved effects beyond individual engagements. Sir, that behavioral change validates the methodology more than any single operation could. When enemies alter their patterns because they recognize Marines exploit predictable behavior, we've achieved psychological impact that extends far beyond casualty statistics. The training session concluded with 60 Marine commanders carrying analytical frameworks that would reshape how their units approached operations against any opponent whose patterns could be studied and exploited. Chun watched them depart, understanding that her innovation had evolved from individual success to institutional capability that would influence Marine tactical thinking for decades. Rodriguez remained as the classroom emptied, his expression showing satisfaction in participating in transformation that began with unconventional analysis of a single enemy commander. Ma'am, 6 months ago, Colonel Briggs thought your plan was dangerously reckless. Today, the Marine Corps teaches your methodology to every tactical commander. That's remarkable institutional evolution. Chun gathered training materials while reflecting on journey from skeptical resistance to complete acceptance. Captain, the methodology succeeded because results proved undeniable. Qasim lost 800 troops in 8 minutes against Marines who suffered 0 casualties. Those numbers override any theoretical objection about risk or deviation from doctrine. The sun set over Quantico as Chun prepared for the next training cycle. Her role as architect of psychological warfare integration, representing responsibility earned through tactical innovation that had challenged fundamental assumptions and proven those challenges valid through overwhelming battlefield success. Marines across multiple theaters now employed variations of her methodology, achieving casualty ratios that conventional doctrine never projected possible. Major Qasim had been a competent commander following successful patterns. That predictability had made him vulnerable to someone willing to design operations around psychological manipulation rather than conventional force application. His defeat had demonstrated that understanding enemy behavior mattered as much as understanding terrain and weapons. Chun locked the training facility, understanding that tomorrow would bring 60 new commanders studying methodology that transformed enemy psychology into exploitable tactical advantage. The Marine Corps had evolved beyond conventional defensive doctrine to embrace innovation that achieved strategic impact through analytical precision rather than simply superior firepower. 6 months earlier, she had been a captain proposing unconventional tactics that violated established doctrine. Today, she taught those tactics to commanders who would carry psychological warfare integration to every operational theater where Marines faced opponents whose patterns could be studied, predicted, and exploited through disciplined execution of operations designed around one simple principle. Successful enemies develop predictable behaviors, and prediction enables manipulation that transforms strength into fatal vulnerability.